You know, there's this deep, almost primal pull that draws us to the last unknown places on Earth. We're talking the deepest oceans, the highest peaks, and, well, the crushing dark of caves that plunge miles into the planet's crust. It's this fascination with pushing the absolute limits of what a human being can endure.
And really, that's the big question, isn't it? When the stakes are that high, when one mistake, one slip, means it's all over, what drives people to risk everything for just a glimpse into the abyss? Today, we're going to look at two absolutely harrowing stories of survival that try to answer that very question.
So, we'll be examining two completely different but equally terrifying environments. First up, in Norway, we've got Plura Cave, an underwater labyrinth of icy, pitch-black water. And then, in Abkhazia, we have Veryovkina Cave, the deepest vertical cave on the entire planet, a place that tests the limits of gravity and, frankly, your own sanity.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll witness the fatal dive in Plura Cave. Then, we'll descend into the flooded nightmare of Veryovkina. And finally, we'll put them side by side to analyze the critical differences that determined who lived and who died.
All right, so our first story takes us to the frozen landscape of Norway. Back in February 2014, an elite team of Finnish divers were getting ready to conquer one of Europe's most treacherous underwater cave systems.
Now, Plura isn't just any cave. The route this team was trying was only just discovered. They were basically diving blind into a passage over 130 meters deep, fighting brutal cold and impossibly tight squeezes, with very, very little information to go on.
So the plan? It was meticulous. They'd enter through a hole they literally cut into the ice, use underwater scooters to save their energy, and pop out of another entrance about 5 hours later. But here's the thing, that 5-hour timeline, that was a best-case scenario, assuming absolutely nothing went wrong. And you have to understand, in these conditions, the stakes are absolute. Any little deviation, any small equipment failure, heck, even a single tear in a dry suit, and that means a slow, freezing death. There was simply no room for mistakes.
And then a mistake happened. Deep down in a narrow passage, a diver, Jari Hooten, got his backup air cylinder snagged. As his partner Patrick tried to free him, Jari started to panic, which, at that depth, is a death sentence. In the chaos, his breathing regulator gets knocked out of his mouth, and by the time Patrick could get it back in, it was too late. His lungs had filled with water.
So there's Patrick, now alone with his friend's body. He looks down at his dive computer, and the time he needs to spend underwater to safely decompress, it had just skyrocketed from 120 minutes to a horrifying 400 minutes. What was supposed to be a 5-hour dive was now on track to be almost 9, and every single second he stayed there just made it longer.
And as Patrick began this grim, solitary journey forward, he had no idea, absolutely no way of knowing, that the second group of 3 divers was following the plan, right on schedule, descending directly into the tragedy he had just left behind.
So when that second team reached the narrow passage, they were confronted with Jari's body blocking the only way through. And they faced this impossible choice. Do you turn back and try an exhausting 12-hour return trip with no guarantee you even have enough oxygen to make it? Or do you, somehow, find a way to push past your fallen friend?
Faced with this absolutely horrific scene, a second diver, Jari Usamaki, he lost his composure. His teammate, Kai, tried desperately to calm him down, but the panic just took over. His breathing became erratic, and within minutes, Plura Cave had claimed its second victim.
In the end, 3 men survived. Patrick, he made it out after 8.5 hours. Vesa, who managed to squeeze past the bodies, surfaced about an hour later. And Kai, who had turned back, finally broke through the ice after more than 9 hours underwater. And get this, each of them swam alone for hours, each one believing he was the only survivor. Okay, so from the icy waters of Norway, our second story takes us to the mountains of Abkhazia and Veryovkina Cave, the deepest cave on Earth. In 2018, another expedition was about to turn into its own terrifying struggle for survival.
To put Veryovkina into perspective for you, its bottom is so remote, so hard to reach that more people have walked on the moon. So this Russian-led team, joined by a British cave photographer named Robbie Schoen, was descending to photograph it and grab some scientific samples. I mean, the descent alone was just this monumental effort. It took 4 days of climbing and crawling through near-freezing mud and water, hauling over 30 kilograms, that's like 66 pounds, of gear,
just to get to the deepest of their 6 underground camps. And this was just the normal, routine part, before disaster even struck.
So on their 7th day at the bottom, their quiet exploration was just shattered. A team member who was way higher up in the cave described it as a deafening roar, as a flash flood just tore through the system without any warning, sending thousands of liters of water crashing down towards them.
Now, the team at the bottom actually got a warning through a cable line, but they made a critical miscalculation. See, sometimes these flood pulses in deep caves can pass pretty quickly, so they assumed this would be no different, and they just kept working. It was a delay that nearly cost them everything.
And then, suddenly, water just explodes from a chasm just meters from their camp. As the chamber started to fill, Robbie Schoen just sprang into action. He quickly clipped onto a rope and started this desperate climb out, leading the way against a torrent of water so powerful it was a struggle just to breathe.
What followed was this excruciating, multi-day vertical escape. After hours of climbing, the lead climbers finally reached a dry section, and thankfully the rest of the team managed to follow. After 4 more days of climbing through the cold and the wet, the entire team finally reached the surface.
So there you have it. 2 disasters in 2 of the world's most extreme environments. One with a tragic loss of life, the other with this miraculous full team survival. Let's compare them to see what lessons we can actually learn here.
The differences are really stark. Plura's disaster was internal. It was an equipment snag that just spiraled into panic, and it killed 2 people. Survival there came down to the incredible individual resolve of the men who were left all alone. But in Veryovkina, the threat was external, this massive flood. And everyone survived because they relied on immediate leadership and a collective team effort.
Both stories really show us that the margin for error is razor thin, basically non-existent. Plura is a terrifying lesson in internal threats. Panic proved to be just as deadly as the icy water. But it also showed how sheer individual will can somehow overcome an impossible ordeal. Veryovkina, though, proves that when you're facing a massive external threat as a group, cohesive teamwork and decisive leadership are the only things that are going to get you out alive. Which really leaves us with one final thought. These explorers, they push the boundaries of what we know about our world and, well, about ourselves. But when you look at the incredibly thin line they walk between triumph and tragedy, you just have to ask, where is the line between profound bravery and pure recklessness? That's a question worth thinking about.